First of all, welcome everyone. Hope everything is started well for the week. The way we're going to do this is we're going to go quickly through some slides. I promise they won't be long. And just to tease you into this. And of course, we can collect questions, which we'll answer at the end. So feel free to type them in. And also Thomas will intervene at any point if I forget or said something wrong. And just a very quick personal note, if you hear my son in the background, that's okay. Okay, so let's go right into it. So what if, for marketing and automation, you didn't have to write connectors? What if you didn't have to do it all yourself and you could benefit from others' work? What if you could really improve users' privacy? We're introducing the Context Server initiative. So let's talk about the expectations that people have when interacting with computer systems in a personalized way. The user expects businesses to recognize them across all systems and channels. So this is really a very simple expectation that users have. The problem is that when we look at the actual systems, this is not actually what's going on. What's going on is that the user is interacting with a lot of different computer systems, and every single one of these has a little bit of the information about this person. And some systems are more or less good at interchanging this information and making sure that the user experience is as good as possible, but most are not. So what we're proposing here is to look at building a standard that will help this issue. And to do so, we've come up with the notion of the context server. The context server is, let's say, more a technology than an actual implementation. And the idea is to be able to provide a standard and an open source implementation, but of course the standard could be built on top of any existing platform to help this problem. So this way the user, all the user information can be shared through the context server standard, and every system can integrate with it. The user also has some added benefits coming from this type of standard. So let's look at two examples which we hope will interest people that are joining us today. So the first one, which is, at least from our experience in communicating around this work, is privacy. After an initial round of a lot of people trying to integrate a lot of data coming from different interactions that the user is doing, there's been sort of a backlash to this where people are really worried about what's going on with their personal data. So basically, it becomes possible with this standard to make it easy for users to know if something, for example, implements this specification. It also makes it possible to use the spec to ask the server all the information that was collected, and it maybe act upon it. So this is, again, just an idea, an example of what we could do with this work. It's not something that's set in stone. And finally, the user could have more control over the data usage and also possibly opt in a lot easier in a less on and off way, because if we're looking at standards such as do not track basically says we're turning everything off, and here it will become possible to say no, we just want to turn some things off, not everything. So for example, let's look at privacy use cases. So a user wants to easily access all the information collected on him by all the websites he visits. A user wants to only once have to say that he's not interested in having his location tracked, whatever sites he's accessing. And when a user opts out of a newsletter for a topic he doesn't like, he would like this to transfer to new systems he interacts with and have control over that. Now let's look at another example which we think might be interesting, is having a standard to make it much easier when we're dealing with all this network of systems to connect them more easily. So having a standard will make it a lot easier for software vendors to have a common language to exchange user profile information. Also, related to the work that we've been proposing, events would become a lot easier to make interoperable. By events here, we're talking about really singular user interactions. Of course, another thing that becomes incredibly useful is the possibility to share segments, so marketing segments across different software. So meaning that marketing segments are not necessarily only available for a CMS or a CRM system. They can really become accessible throughout. And although this could be possible with some existing solutions, it would make it a lot easier to have this through many systems using a standard. And finally, of course, marketing automation vendors can access more profile information or access context or events than before, because hopefully if this gets adopted widely, which is what we're trying to do, then a lot of things should open up. I also wanted to quickly talk about the benefits of joining. Right now, although we've produced some material, you know, nothing, I mean, this is just starting, so everything can be changed. So the thing is that by joining, you make sure the standard will be easier to integrate with your existing systems, because we know we could say, okay, this doesn't really work in general. Of course, you have a first mover advantage because basically this, at least this standard, we couldn't identify anything else in this space. There are things related in this space, but there's nothing really in this space yet. And of course, this is just a little bit disruptive because a lot of people are trying to build silos until now. But the idea here is to really benefit from the exchange, which makes it also a competitive advantage of a different sort. And finally, the idea is also to provide something that will help corporations and, of course, end user experiences. I just put a quick slide. If you want to read more, of course, we'll go into questions as soon as possible. But here is a slide about the TC first. Then there's a very extensive CMS Wire article that you can also read. The current proposal, which is, as I said, just a proposal. And finally, if you're interested, there's also an open source prototype that was started that is under an Apache license, and that's available on GitHub. Okay, so that is it for the slides.
Serge, I'd like to add a small thing so everyone knows. The context server, like Serge said, is meant to be possible to implement on existing, let's say, marketing automation tool. But it's not like only possible to use segments across different systems. You could also sort of create them from different systems. So it's really bi-directional, and events occurring in the context server will propagate to all the desired systems you integrate. So it's really about aggregating and sharing not just data but also metadata like segments.
Absolutely, and it's also the same can be said about user profiles, or there's also stuff that looks more like administration types of accesses. We, for example, talked about uses with newsletter applications that want to access data to produce the lists of users and so forth.
Yes, I saw that there come a few more attendees at the end of the webinar.
I saw that too, so maybe that was really fast. I didn't expect it to be that fast. So maybe do you want to go back and highlight a couple of the different slides in the beginning since people joined us after you went through those?
I'm sorry, Dee, could you repeat that?
I was just wondering, were there a couple slides, since we did have some folks that just joined, that maybe you could go back over some of the things that you said in the very beginning, and sorry if it's a repeat for some of the folks that were on in the beginning. I don't see any questions yet, or maybe there's some other topics that you can initiate to get folks going to ask questions.
Absolutely.
I could just tell people that in the GoToWebinar control panel, there's a tab that says question in the middle there.
Right.
Just expand that one and you can write questions and we'll try to answer them ASAP.
Okay, so what I propose is that actually we'll go to another slide deck so that I avoid repeating too much, which I think would also be interesting. Basically, this is a slide deck that we used during our first meeting. And so you'll get sort of the idea of how this is organized and what we're working on. So here we go. So basically, we talked about the expectations. So this is really, it's always interesting in computing because actually formalizing a problem is pretty easy. Solving it is a lot harder. So having a standard to interoperate the profile information and what is going on in context is very easy to talk about, but it's incredibly difficult to solve, especially since we're not dealing with new systems, we're dealing with existing systems that are potentially already in place for a long time. So aggregating all the user profile information and all the context around it is really what we're trying to work on. And we've built already a prototype software just basically to kind of guide the work around the standard, mostly because we have different ways of working. Personally, I'm more a bottom-up kind of person, and Thomas is more top-down, and we've kind of met in the middle. Thomas and I have been working on this for the last 2 years, but we've only just started the technical committee, and of course, the idea was really not to exclude anybody, quite the opposite. We really want to make sure that people can get on board and change things, which have already been happening in the last few months. If you're interested at knowing a little bit more about how this works, so basically the context server could be anything. It could be an existing marketing automation tool. It could be a new server. It could be a CRM, really anything. And basically what you feed into it is mostly events. So these are really actions types of things, like click here, some user clicked here, or so forth. And he can, out of the context server, you can get the context, which is usually an augmented profile. What we're using as protocols is incredibly simple. We're just using HTTP plus JSON. There is no more complex than that. If we look at, again, this is just examples. Nothing is formalized, but this could be an example context, and this actually is based on another standard which is called digital data, which is being proposed at the W3C, which specifies the browser side representation of this object. Also, if we look at how things could scale, because that's always one of the technical difficulties of having a system that's highly personalizable, is that, as you can see, the context server can integrate with a lot of different systems, and of course that means it's going to be very visible and extremely, excuse me, there's going to be under a lot of load. I'm not going to go into all the details, but if you're interested, you can learn more, and we're always available. We meet about once a month. I'm sorry for the noise. My son is right next to me.
No problem.
And we meet about once a month for the main meetings, and then we break into work groups that are active, very active actually. And so we'd love to have more people on board. And yeah, I think that's hopefully that's a little bit more information.
So a good follow-up to your points about the structure of the technical committee. We do have a question. The question is, will there be a requirements subgroup to expand the slide on user need and opportunities?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the last part? I got some cut in the audio.
Oh, that's okay. So what we call sort of a subcommittee, will there be a subcommittee that will expand the slide? You talked about user needs and opportunities. So what this question is referencing is, will there be a subgroup that will focus on expanding the user opportunities?
Yes, actually what we're doing right now is that we have, we call them workshops. Well, actually work groups, sorry. We have 3 different work groups. One of them is focused on evangelizing the effort. And the 2 others right now are focused on defining use cases and really trying to look at what kind of problems are we trying to solve. And this is really where we need more people, because basically people come from different horizons, but most people right now involved come from either portal or CMS orientations. And we do try our best to make this as generic as possible, but having people coming in from different horizons like marketing automation, CRM, even ERP would be really valuable to making sure that this will serve these needs. And so around user needs and also privacy, which is a big case, this is definitely something where we're hoping to have more. So we can change the organization at any time. If people want to really focus on just one case, that's entirely possible. Where at this point things have just started, so it's really possible to organize this as anybody wants.
Okay, very good. So we have another question. Is this technology based on anything like ESB, Enterprise Service Bus?
Enterprise what?
Enterprise Service Bus, ESB.
ESB.
Are you guys familiar with that?
Oh,
yeah.
Sorry, I understood box instead of bus.
It could be my accent.
Well, when you say technology, there's really 2 things. First thing is that there's the standard, which is about the APIs and the domains, which is sort of generic in terms of technology. Then comes the implementations. And technically, the implementations could be whatever. And I mean, you would typically be interested in discussing with systems, but we try to make the standard definition be as simple as Serge said, with just REST APIs and JSON objects being transferred back and forth to the context server. So if you have a ESB outside of the context server, sure, but we won't sort of put any requirements to have a context server in this spec. If a ESB could be like act as a context server, if that answers the question.
Yeah, so let's say the focus we're trying to have is really on defining at this point sort of the domain and the main interactions, and things are still very open in terms of how we could integrate this with different systems. If they are, even the HTTP plus JSON is something that's open for discussion. And I'm really sorry about my kid. I had a little bit of a daycare issue today, so so again, I mean, really the objective, we've worked with previous technical committees, and the objective is to make this as straightforward as possible to integrate. So whatever goes in that direction will definitely be something we're very interested in. If something we've not seen yet is better, we'll go that way, that's for sure. But what we will try to avoid is having multiple bindings, because that makes things a lot more complicated to implement.
Okay, well, I don't see any more questions. Is there I think that the attendees can, got a pretty good flavor for what we're trying to do here. I think there are several takeaways. This group just started, CXS Technical Committee just started a couple months ago. We are open for any kind of input. If you have any questions about OASIS or participating, you can send me an email. I will be sending you a follow-up email with a link to the recorded version. And also, obviously, both Serge and Thomas are always open to any kinds of questions that you have. Again, we appreciate you attending today. I don't see any further questions coming in. Would either one of you like to say anything before we close?
Actually, if you don't mind, yes, I would. I'm just trying to write this down. Here we go. I'm just writing down. We forgot to write our email addresses, so I'm just putting them here on the screen, so you have them. Feel free to write directly. We'll answer any questions you have, and please also help us get the word out if you can. That we really highly appreciate it, because we do believe that we have something that could really help in a lot of situations, and we want to make it as visible as possible at this point. And yeah, hope you'll join us.
That's about the nicest invitation that I've heard in a very long time. Okay, so in the follow-up email, I will include both of your email addresses. So again, thank you so much for taking the time to learn a little bit more about the CXS Technical Committee today, and I'll be in touch soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much.